one of the biggest misconceptions of nines is that we can't make a decision or that we don't have an opinion. Because one of the things that nines struggle with is voicing their own opinion.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Wednesdays with Watson. I am so glad that you have decided to join us today. We are mid-season, season 3, a season that we are calling Trauma, Spaces, Places, and Aces. The last 8 episodes, we have focused primarily on leaning into how God made us, using the powerful tool of the Enneagram to help us not only understand how God made us, but also help us understand how to heal from trauma and maybe even understand it. So I am here again with my co-host, Chrissy Luthridge. Say hi to the people, Chrissy Luthridge.
Hey, it's good to be here.
She meant to say hey to the people. Today we have our very good friend, Joy Tiffany, all the way from Pennsylvania. Hey, Joy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I know this is way outside your comfort zone, and so I am so grateful.
Just a little bit, but it's going to be okay.
Just a tiny bit. I keep telling her that we have an edit button. Okay, so we are going to just dive right in, and this should not surprise you because you've known me for a little bit, that we just go for the juggler at the very beginning. And so you are rounding up, you're bookending this series on the Enneagram, and so my listeners are probably really fond of this question and people's answer to the question. But what is your favorite thing about how God made you?
You know, it was interesting when you asked me this question, because the first thing that popped into my mind was that he can use me to encourage others, which is something I did not know was something that is very much a 9 thing to do. And it's one of the key ways that 9s communicate, the other 2 being reassuring and calming.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that either. And I will say, as your friend, that's not my favorite thing about how God made you, but I would agree with that you are the consummate encourager. And we'll get to why. I think you're right. I think bringing awareness to how God made you is like, oh, whoa, this is why I'm the consummate encourager and can be that for people. So let's move into the core fear or the core motivation of the Enneagram 9.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Carissa's description of the core fear for the Enneagram 9 resonated with you? And Amy, can you rehash what the core fear is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the core fear of the Enneagram 9 is conflict with others, tension, and disconnection. But the other thing I wanted to add on to that, because I thought this was particularly powerful for the 9s, when she talked about when the core fear of the Enneagram 9 is triggered, then you begin to merge your opinions into others, that resulting in your thinking that your voice in this world and your presence in this world doesn't matter. And so I am really curious of how all of that resonated with you.
Yeah, so everything that I do is with one goal in mind, and that's keeping a state of peace. Internally, externally, the goal is peace. Now, that being said, for me, I think it weighs a little bit more heavily on the side of the fear of feeling shut out or overlooked and losing connection with others. I can deal with conflict and tension to a degree because a 9 at its worst can be stubborn and passive aggressive. And that's me right there. But even then, I'm only comfortable letting the conflict go so far before the air quote, go along to get along mentality kicks in that Carissa mentioned.
Yeah. Did the part, and I'm loving doing the last 2 interviews that we've done have been with close friends of mine. And so it's a little bit more personal to me. But how did that, my voice doesn't matter and my presence doesn't matter in this world? So like at your worst, or, when Satan's after you at his best, if you will. Did that resonate with you? Like, my voice doesn't matter. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And my inner critic is constantly telling me that what I've said doesn't matter, that me showing up doesn't matter. So yeah, I think it's very closely tied together. And I'm very close with those two numbers to begin with.
9 and 1.
One.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably wing into the 1. And of course, Carissa said that inner critic was she described it as mean and relentless into that 1. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think you resonate with that a little
I
bit, don't
do.
you?
That's my second highest score as well. And so it's a loud voice, and it's a great tool of the enemy to tell us either we don't matter, or our voice doesn't matter, or you're not doing it right, or any number of things.
Well, and I'm good friends with both of you, and you both are fluent in what we call Watsonese. And so one of the things on the 1s is that you need things to be right. You need things to be accurate. So Joy, I can see where when you pair that with the 9, like you see something wrong or inaccurate and everything in you wants to make it right. Yet there's this aversion to doing that because you don't want the conflict and the tension. And so
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
yeah, I think it's tough. Carissa went so far as to say on the 1s, and this is clearly where you wing, it's hard to live that life. And so I think that's a very honest response. And so for those of you out there who are listening who are 9s, hear us when we say that your voice matters and so does your presence. And we're going to continue to be down on that as we in this interview. I am curious as a follow-up from that. And it's been cool to watch you over the course of our friendship grow, because I did see you running from these core fears, and now I'm seeing you embrace these core fears. But for the people out there listening, I got chills just asking that question. For the people out there listening who aren't as far along in their healing journey as you are, that are 9s, that are running from it, what were some ways that you ran from this core fear? Were you just silent most of the time?
Silence, definitely. The biggest thing, I have a very dear friend who refers to me as going into my cave.
Mm-hmm.
When there are things that I am trying to avoid, I hide and I will disappear. And usually within a couple of days of that happening, she's right on top of that and is texting me and saying, I will give you one more day in your cave and then I'm coming in after you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was an eye opener for me to realize that that's what I was doing. I'd never seen it from somebody else's perspective before. To me, I was backing away to protect myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's something that since I've been friends with you, you're like, I'm not in my cave yet. And so, yeah, and I think you bring in a good component of this podcast, which tends to be the theme, right? On the interviews that we've done so far, is community, right? You have somebody that's like, you know what, I'm seeing you run from that fear, and I will come in your house and I will pull you out of your room. I'm in Florida. I can't do that. Chrissy would certainly do that if she was closer to you. But that this aspect of community is so important. And so for 9s out there, if you find yourself isolating, if you find yourself shutting down, if you find yourself not answering text messages, emails, phone calls, you need a 2 a.m. friend. You need somebody like Joy just described that will come drag you out of that cave, because this is going to be a propensity for you. You know, Joy, one of the things that I found the most interesting about the 9s, especially as your friend, is that you have the superpower of seeing the perspective of everyone. When I heard that, it literally made my brain hurt, because just my little old perspective and my two-ness is exhausting. What's it like to live with that? I'm going to call it a gift. You're probably like, probably not so much, but it is your superpower, where you are able to walk into a situation and see everybody's perspective. You're like Switzerland's president.
I've never considered it to be anything other than a blessing, really. I mean, if you think about it, that is what makes me empathetic. However, it's also probably why I crave alone time after being around people. Alone time is when I can allow myself to process all of the things and to figure out how I feel and what I think about situations. I can't do that in the presence of others because my focus is on others.
So, because it sounds like if we come to you with a conflict and you're coming at it from all the perspectives, it's got to be emotionally draining. So is it important for those of us living with nines in our lives not to bring every conflict with to you because it's taxing on you? Does that resonate with you? Does that feel like an accurate description?
Yes, definitely accurate. Once people come to see you as the mediator, they can have the tendency to bring all their conflicts your way because you're just so good at resolving it.
Yeah.
But what they don't understand is that stepping into these conflicts can come at a very great cost to ourselves. Conflict is a stressor for us. So if we don't have time between these conflicts to reset, that's when we tend to shut down. We shut down our emotions in particular. We can become withdrawn, complacent, and numb. Staying in this state for prolonged periods of time is when we become very unhealthy.
Yeah, it makes sense. No, I mean, everything you're saying, I'm having a lot of aha moments because it's like, oh, that makes all kinds of sense. You have a superpower, but we can misuse it, and then we've drained you, the person that really, I mean, it is such a gift to be able to see all the perspectives. And yet, living in community, I want to be aware of what it does to that person, and not just.
No doubt. And I want to know when I'm the person, like, I don't know as your friend, if 8 other people have come to you today for advice and I've sent you something like, Joy, please help me solve all the world's problems. And so I'm sitting on a podcast with 2 of my closest friends who have a difficulty in articulating their words and their needs. So how can we know when it's like you're at critical mass with people bringing conflict to you? Like I'm all full. I need some alone time. I need to debrief. What are something that
what's the worst thing?
Yeah. What's the worst thing we can do to you, really, besides just not pay attention to, probably 12,000 other people brought a conflict to Joy today. Yeah, I think that's my question is, what is the worst thing we can do to a 9?
It's probably a little bit unrelated to bringing your conflicts. I would say one of the biggest misconceptions of 9s is that we can't make a decision or that we don't have an opinion. Because one of the things that 9s struggle with is voicing their own opinion. It doesn't mean we don't have it.
Why?
It just means we have trouble because our focus is continually on others.
So your thoughts are kind of in a lot of directions. And so I bet it is harder to.
Yeah,
I can see that.
It becomes more about what is going to keep that peace. And so therefore, what someone else may want becomes higher than ourselves. We put their need or their want ahead of our own. And to maintain that sense of peace, that's why we usually just go along with what others want. But by asking for our opinion or our input or our ideas, you've communicated that our voice matters. And that goes back to one of those core fears. But if that opinion, input, or idea goes unacknowledged or is just ignored, that communicates the complete opposite. And that core fear of being overlooked kicks in.
That makes so much sense. And so for those of you out there who have 9s in your life, and I've experienced this with you, Joy, is like, you know what? I'm going to save my questions, my opinion when I need the best of Joy for when I need the best of Joy, because I know this about you only because I have done this. But at the same time, I can't say that I've not learned the hard way of coming to a 9, not just you, but I've got lots of 9s in my life. And because I'm a 2 and super accommodating, I'll smile and shake my head and go, yeah, I'm going to do that, even though I totally disagree with you. And so I think one of the things, Chrissy, that you have taught me is to be honest. It's like, yeah, that sounds good, but I'm probably not going to go that direction. But what I did take from what you just said from me, because it's impossible for somebody to say something to you and not to be able to pull out some little nugget, right? And so when you go to a 9, understand that they are already sacrificing by even holding space for you in some ways, because you can't help it.
There's so much thought process going through.
Yeah.
To give an opinion, they're thinking through so many different angles.
Right.
That when they give an opinion,
it matters.
So would the best thing be, let's just say, you know, I come to you, you give me an opinion, and I'm not going that direction, but the important thing is to at least acknowledge
the voice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Acknowledge it, you know, and even if you can point out why it was helpful, even if it led you in a different direction, to know that your voice led to them being able to make X decision.
Yeah.
That's going to resonate with a 9.
That is huge.
That makes a lot of sense.
That is really, really huge. And it really is your way of saying, you know, you love us because you have entered into this very noisy space. And I can't imagine, as we're doing these interviews, and we're trying to absorb 9 different personalities and 9 different personality types. I can't imagine walking into a situation and saying the 1 needs to be right, the 2 needs to be loved, the 3 needs to be seen, the 4 needs to be, you know, and on and on. I mean, like, my mind is just blown when I think of that. And so we need 9s, but we need to take care of them.
Yeah. And listen to them. I mean, honestly, it's a lot of wisdom. I came to you recently with a small medical issue, but I knew when I got feedback, it wasn't just, I Googled it and blah, blah, blah.
What you trying to say? I do that too.
Right. Somebody here will Google it, like, good luck with that. I knew when I got information from you, it was going to be well thought out and considerate of all things. And so I took it like, I mean, it was like a holy grail of information, rather than the other friend who's like, well, let it sit for a few days. And hey, that person's great too. But
that wasn't me.
Right, no. But when you go to somebody, if you know you have a 9 in your life, dude, pay attention, because they've gone to a lot of effort to make sure you have a well-rounded response to whatever you're asking them.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge, and it's enlightening. And I will tell you that if I base on like how much interaction I got on social media posts, I got the most interaction when I posted things about 9s. And so I think there's a lot of 9s.
Misunderstood. And I think a lot of the numbers are misunderstood, but I can see where the indecisiveness, and I'm air quoting that, can seem that way. And yet I know you, Joy, is actually quite decisive, but I could see where on the outside somebody could look in and think that a 9 is indecisive. However, a 6 is. We truly.
I want to touch real quick on that, because that comes down to a comfort level. So I know with you that I can voice my opinion and you're not going to walk away.
That means
you're going to make me cry.
Me
too. Please say me too.
Absolutely. Both of you. Yeah. That makes a huge difference. Like, because my goal, remember, is to avoid conflict. I know with the 2 of you that even if it does result in conflict, we're going to work through that.
Yeah. And we recently,
and we're going to move forward.
That happened, right? And so, yeah, no, I think that is, wow. This one is resonating a lot with me, just because we're such close friends, and I know 9s out there are just feeling very, very heard. Well, Joy, as you know, of course, as just somebody who is my prayer partner in this podcast, I send you podcast covers and you go move this and do this, and it drives me crazy, but that's why I love you, and we make the changes and we move on. But as you know, this podcast is about trauma. And when I first met you, I will never forget where I was standing when you handed me your phone with a song that I'm going to talk about later. But you had just really come off of some very difficult years. This 3 losses in 3 years. And I'm just wondering if you can help us understand how at that point you handled that immense loss without this understanding of how God made you?
And in truth, I didn't handle it. Because I was so focused on everyone else, I didn't even acknowledge that I had suffered those losses as well. So I had lost my sister-in-law of 25 years, followed by a cousin who was like a sister to me, and followed by my dad. And I avoided it because there was conflict and tension in the midst of the losses. And to protect myself, I shut down. So I allowed myself to become numb.
That's where you were at the basement of that VRBO in Tennessee when I first met you, shutdown mode.
Oh yeah, big time. So I allowed myself to become numb. And unfortunately, this usually means that I come across as not caring or feeling. And in truth, I feel things very deeply. But it's incredibly difficult to process my own emotions when everything in me is desperate to keep the peace. So removing my own emotion can allow me to see how others are feeling and step into that role of peacemaker from a more logical standpoint. It's easier to diffuse a conflict using that logic because emotions are messy and you can't tell someone else what they can feel. They're going to feel the way that they feel. But stuffing my own emotions into a drawer to deal with later backfired because I didn't go back to them until it was almost too late.
Why they were there.
And, I mentioned this friend of mine, and it honestly wasn't until she stepped in again that I began to deal with all of those emotions with the help of a very amazing counselor. But looking back at it now, I cringe thinking of what could have happened if I had continued to stay in that numb state.
And again, community counseling.
And I feel like that sounds like a lot of, if not all nines in trauma would do the same, because you're constantly thinking of others. And so the only way you can do that is to shut yourself down so that you can focus elsewhere. It's a dangerous place to be. It really is. And I'm so grateful that the Lord provided community.
And counseling, which is also part of this.
How do you think you would have handled it differently now?
So one of the things that has come out of all of that is the importance of setting boundaries, which is not easy for a peacemaker because it means sometimes that things have to remain in a state of conflict. But one of the things Carissa says of nines is that we have something significant to contribute to the world. And we can't do that if we've numbed ourselves to the point of no longer caring. So it means taking the time to take care of yourself, acknowledge the loss, grieve the loss, and remember that you matter too. And I've focused more on the self-care part of it. I have some of those boundaries in place at this point, and people have been very respectful of those boundaries. And I've seen them step back.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, and so I wonder then, and we're asking this next question to everybody, how has the last 20 months been for you? Now, when this podcast actually airs, it will be quite a bit different. So what I'm referring to is the pandemic. So for nines out there and for yourself, talk to us about how nines are experiencing all the things related to COVID-19.
It's when you first brought this up, my first response was that it's been pure torture. And I don't know how to describe it in any other way, because if you think about it, before the pandemic started, we had political conflict that bled into the pandemic conflict, which has bled into social media conflict over both of those things, plus just the normal everyday conflict. So I've had to fight hard to keep from letting myself go numb. There have been days that I've won that battle and days that I've not. And here's the thing, there's far more conflict than one peacemaker can take on, right?
Whoa. Wait, let's
So it's
breathe. Say that one more time. Let's let that breathe, because that is huge.
Yeah.
Let's say that again.
there's far more conflict than one peacemaker can take on.
Far more conflict than one peacemaker can take on.
Yeah.
I can think of one peacemaker whose job it is, and that's the king of the world.
Yeah. And so it's been a time of leaning into that king of the world. And that song, I love that song to this day. But asking him to reveal the places where I can be beneficial. You know, I can't step into the middle of every conflict that comes my way because I'll destroy myself.
Yes.
But there's great freedom in recognizing that even if I am not the one to suit up, I can pray and God will hear those prayers. And I'm living through situations like that today where everything in me wants to step in and God has not given that green light. And so all I can do is pray through it. And there are days that I fall asleep praying that he would step into those situations.
Yeah, it's powerful. So nines out there who we've all lived through this pandemic. Even when I phrased that question for you, Joy, and for the other nines, it didn't occur to me that you would view it like this is a million little conflicts.
It is. When you look at it, it's just been conflict layered on top of each other, on top of each other. So, and there really hasn't been a break.
None.
You know?
Mm-mm.
And so I on the positive side, if there is one, it is an opportunity to lean into the Lord like you're talking about, and recognize that truly we need him.
Yeah.
You know?
We really
do. It is not going to be by our own strength.
Yeah, as we so often refer to on this podcast as a star of the story, who also, by the way, was able to see everybody's perspective. And on the cross, he looked to his right and he looked to his left, and he said to both of them, you know, you have brought, your own conflict has brought you to this cross, but all you have to do is believe in me and you will be with me in paradise. And one decided not, and one decided to. But the fact that Jesus even decided at his lowest point to enter into the conflict of humankind tells us that he can do that because he's God, that we can't. And so while he's not hanging on the cross anymore, he still very, very much wants us to invite him into conflict. And I think that that's just really important for us to remember. So as we round out the podcast, Chrissy, this is your favorite question to ask. So if the mic is yours.
I really like asking everybody, how can we do life better with nines? What is it that you would love for all of us to know about nines and how we can live in community better with you all?
One of the things that has come out of just studying nines, basically studying myself to understand why I do what I do. One of the questions that I came out with was wondering how many nines have quality time as the love language. Because for me, that's a surefire way to show me that my presence matters. As Carissa said, nines want to know that their presence matters. So when someone takes the time to focus on us and hear what we have to say, it reinforces that for us. Know that we enjoy discussions, but sometimes we kind of meander. But if you stick with us, you'll find that we have things of value to say. Let us give you the benefit of our superpower of seeing all those perspectives. And when you do, it shows us that what we have to say is important to you and that we matter. We tend to focus on others. So having someone focus on us speaks right to our heart.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit speechless. That doesn't happen very often. But being a two and deferring to others too, I get that. And I just a practical example of this, and why I'm spending a half a podcast season on the Enneagram is having studied my friends. So I started with the 6s and the 9s because you guys are two of my closest friends. I was recently up near you, Joy, visiting another friend, and I knew that I had to get to you, even if it was only for 4 or 5 hours, because that was the way I could show you that I loved you. I could have asked you to come to me. I could have asked you to do any number of things. But because I learned this, I white knuckled my way in the Northeast. You people drive crazy out there from Allentown to where you live. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to, and it was an amazing time. But I wanted you to know that I'm listening. I get it. That doesn't make me a good person. That just makes me an informed person. And that's what I want this podcast to do. And that is that question is the reason why we want people out there to know how we can show 9s that we love them. Yeah. I just want to end with, Joy, one of my favorite things that you and I talked about in the early days of our friendship, and this really seemed to resonate with you, 9s out there. When you get on an airplane and they tell you to put your mask on, and I mean an oxygen mask, I'm going to say that, before putting on the mask of another person. There's a reason for that, because you need to be able to breathe air if you are going to help the person next to you. And Joy, that really resonated with you early in our friendship, because, and the same thing is true. So we have to figure out a way with 9s to differentiate between the cave and the time that, like Jesus, you had to go out into the wilderness and be by yourself and decompress, because Jesus had to do that. Because you know what? I think Jesus was a 9. Well, he was in everything. He certainly was. And so 9s out there, try to make sure that you're walking that line as finely as you can between walking into a cave and being like Jesus, where you go to isolate. And so, Joy, to use your example, you fall asleep praying in the wilderness, asking God to step in with all the conflicts, the king of the world. And by the way, that was the song that Joy held up to me. And Help Us Want the Healer. There was that whole CD where you just sat down there and everybody else was talking about other stuff. But he is the king of the world. And the other thing that resonates with you, Joy, that I want to say to you, and I've not said this on any other number, but I'm saying it to 9s. You matter. Full stop.
That was single-handedly the one message from your first season that I clung through the entire season. And every time you posted it was a reminder that you matter.
And 9s out there, you matter. And I matter, and Chrissy, you matter. And so for those of you that are 9s out there, please take good care of yourselves. Please, we need you.
Yeah.
We need you. I need my friend Joy the 9. I need my friend Joy the 1 wing. But God made you just like he wants you, and the strength that I have seen firsthand you bring into my life. And so these podcasts with Chrissy and with you and with Jenny, who would have aired before this episode, has been deeply personal to me, because if I don't ever do another thing with this podcast, what has occurred here has been nothing short of miraculous. Okay, guys, so here's the deal. Next, in 2 weeks, we will begin the Spaces and Places part of the podcast, where we will be bringing to you trauma in these different arenas. And so I look forward to seeing you back here in 2 weeks in the Healing Zone. And before we end this podcast, you know what I am going to say. You are seen, you are known, you are heard, you are loved, and you are valued.
Let my life glorify you and teach me to walk beside you.